5 books and counting. The Tales from the Omni Vault continues to expand as a universe. Go ahead and check the links down in the description to get your copies today. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and here we are at the end of the first season, possibly series, but I guess that depends on what the numbers say, for Monarch Legacy of Monsters. And here I've got to not only share my thoughts on this particular episode, but of the series as a whole. And I will tell you up front, as I've been looking back at the entire series, after watching the finale and seeing where it was all building to, I do have certain thoughts. Anyway, first of all, thoughts on the final episode. The final episode had some good emotional moments. Kurt Russell, with his performance, I mean, like I've been saying the whole time, he's always good. The moment where we reunite Lee with Keiko was a very strong emotional moment. In fact, they had plenty of good emotional moments throughout the whole episode. It really did feel like they knew each other, missed each other, even though this is the first time technically that those two actors have interacted with each other. It just felt like exactly the same as when we've seen them in the past. And, of course, we also have the kaiju fight, which is technically the only kaiju fight in this season between Godzilla and the Ion Dragon. It is very, very, very short. Like, I'm thinking back to Godzilla 2014 almost. It's a little different in that we actually get to see the whole thing, and it lasts longer without cutting away, but at the same time, really does feel brief. Still, the special effects look good. Ion Dragon, I mean, we knew he was gonna die, but he at least gave Godzilla a little bit of a challenge. And, you know, the kaiju fights are generally what we watch these things for anyway. That's what makes them kaiju movies and shows. So, overall, those were the positive things. As for the rest of the episode, I'm confused about Axis Mundi, which is apparently the name of that realm they're in. They do specify it's not specifically the Hollow Earth. It's not even a region of the very interior. They kind of confirm the idea that it's something in between, but the way it's presented doesn't feel like it really adds up. Like, the whole... Shaw introduces this concept where they're talking about how they fell into this thing and now they're here, and Shaw says, did we fall in or did we enter? I'm paraphrasing a little. That and the way we see Godzilla step into this realm, as well as how the little pod leaves at the end, kind of makes me wonder if... It almost feels more like it's traveling between dimensions, where this isn't someplace within the Earth. The time distortion isn't because of the gravity, it's because it's in a completely different dimension, or a different part of the universe, or something. It just doesn't feel like it fits. And that raises the question of what the heck it's doing there. I don't see how that fits in with everything else. And I also have to say that for as good as the effects were for the kaiju fight, like I said, it's very brief, but it's also pointless. There's no real reason for this fight to be there, other than it's the final episode and they've got to deliver some kind of a kaiju fight because that's what Godzilla fans are expecting. But that makes it stand out in a bad way from the rest of the monsterverse. You look back at the monsterverse in the movies, every single fight has stakes to it. Where the outcome will have consequences going forward. So there is a reason to care about why that fight happens. Whether it's Godzilla against the Mutos, Godzilla against Ghidorah, Rodan against Ghidorah, Mothra against Rodan, Kong against the Skull Devil, Kong against Godzilla, Godzilla and Kong against Mechagodzilla. They all have a lot riding on them, which is why they matter. The only fights I can think of in the movies that don't necessarily have big stakes are Kong fighting the Meyer Squid in Skull Island, Kong Skull Island, that is, the movie, not that god-awful animated series, and Kong's encounter with the Warbats in the Hollow Earth and GVK. But even though those don't necessarily have widespread stakes to them, there is still a sense of reminding us of Kong's place in the world, how he fits in, what he's like, things like that. So they still matter in that regard. Here, though, I mean, the whole series has been building up this looming threat of gamma spikes all over the world, just like what happened before G-Day. So there's another big event that's gonna happen, and we don't know how to deal with it. Monarch is just sitting on its hands and doing nothing, because apparently that's what Monarch does now, in contrast to the movies. Hiroshi is doing something about it, except maybe he's not. We don't really know what he's up to, do we? Shaw tries doing something about it, but he turns into Snidely Whiplash for those episodes where he is actively doing something. The point is, that's what the series has been building up over the course of every episode. And you would think the final kaiju battle would have something to do with that. That they woke Godzilla up, he must notice what's going on too, so he's going to somehow be vital to stopping it. If not permanently, then at least for the time being. Instead, though, the only thing riding on this particular fight is whether or not the 4 people stranded in Axis Mundi get out and get back to the regular surface of the Earth. And whether or not you care about those stakes depends entirely on how much you care about these characters, which, I mean, I'll get to that in a moment, but overall, like, it has nothing to do with anything. The Ion Dragon wasn't a threat. He was already hanging out down there. He wasn't bothering anybody. He only showed up because they lured him there, so it was kind of their fault. And Godzilla showed up pretty much for the same reason. He wasn't supposed to be there either. He wasn't going to bother anybody unless, of course, he happened to see somebody attacking him, like the Ion Dragon wound up doing. That's the only reason this fight happens. And regardless of who wins, which we obviously know it's going to be Godzilla, nothing happens after that. Who cares? This is a fight that doesn't affect anything outside of the immediate area where it's happening, which means it's a fight that doesn't matter. You want to talk about a story, kaiju fight where it just feels like people bashing together action figures for the heck of it. That's what this feels like. Godzilla vs. Kong often gets that description. Bull. Godzilla vs. Kong actually built up emotional stakes throughout the movie so that by the time we actually got that final battle, where Godzilla and Kong are finally going toe-to-toe for real, we were invested. We wanted to see who won, and it mattered who won. Here it's just, oh yeah, there's a dragon, Godzilla showed up too, they can fight, yeah, whatever. My word, the random appearance of Olkondoru in Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster and Godzilla's tussle with him has more to do with the contents of that movie than this fight has to do with anything that happened in the series. And when that's the bar you can't get over, a random fight with Beaky Buzzard's Toku cousin, that's a pretty big failure. And like I said, now that we are at the finale, I'm looking back at the series as a whole. These episode-by-episode things have been my record of how I felt after each specific episode. I can think that an individual episode is good or bad, depending. And a lot of the time, especially early on, I was saying, let's see where it goes. Because, you know, clearly they're going for a serialized format. We don't want to have all the payoff happen way too early. So let's see what happens by the time we get to the end. Now we're at the end. I'm looking back. I'm reassessing a lot of stuff. For starters, I'm looking back at certain things and the character development seems all out of joint. You remember when Kate's PTSD manifested as claustrophobia? Because the show doesn't appear to. Apparently, all she needed was one very brief conversation with May in about midway through the show, and suddenly she's better. From that point onward, she's been very happier and energetic, like, yeah, let's go find our dad that I wanted nothing to do with when all of this started. I actually do want to do it now, and I'll be more than happy to introduce him to his grandmother when we find her alive and without having aged a day. Yeah, it's all good now. I understand him, I think. I'd never actually say that or express any sign that maybe I do. But, you know, water under the bridge, apparently, after just one conversation that shouldn't really have solved anything. You know, years of therapy and psychoanalysis, all you need is to talk to a stranger who apparently you don't even know the real name of, and that'll get you over it, folks. No, it won't. If you're having these sort of trouble, seriously, get professional help. There's no shame in admitting you need it. And then, as mentioned, there's the whole weird plot with the different gamma spikes all over the place. They keep making it out to be a big deal, and they kind of mention that it's leveling out in the final episode, but it's not really resolved, so we still don't really know what all of that was about. And apparently 2 years have passed by the time everyone gets back to the surface, so apparently nothing that major must have happened. And of course, that ties into Hiroshi, and I'm looking back over all these episodes and realizing I can't really get a read on him. The actor's had some good emotional moments, sure, but the character, he's all over the map. And I don't mean literally, I mean in terms of what we're supposed to take away from him. I have no idea. First he's dead, then he's alive, then he's tracking all of these different gamma spikes because he plotted them somehow, and he's trying to do something about them, but what is he trying to do? Well, apparently it has nothing to do with closing them or getting into the Earth to find his mother, because he doesn't believe that any of his parents' theories were true, even when he's looking at the evidence right in front of his face of a man who went down there and came back up 20 years later without having aged a day. And he betrays that very same man the same way he betrays both of his wives. And in fact, what does any of that have to do with the fact that he's a bigamist? What was the point of that other than to have Ken and Kate be stepbrothers and have that initial shock of learning about a sibling you never knew you had? I don't even know anymore. I'm looking back and I'm thinking, what was all of this actually supposed to be? And why didn't it play out in any significant way? Like, was it because there wasn't enough time? Was it because of just plain ineptitude? Was it because there were so many different people writing each episode? Like, you know, one writer writes this, one writer writes that, one writer writes 3, 4, 5, that they just didn't have time to actually get everything straight before they had to start filming? I really don't know. But it feels like so much of the stuff I was saying, let's wait and see where it goes, didn't actually go anywhere, if it even started. That is frustrating. Like I said, each individual episode affected me in one way or the other, but now I'm looking back at the whole series, and I'm just realizing that I don't feel it anymore. In fact, I have to say, I don't actually think I care about Monarch: Legacy of Monsters. I don't hate it. I'm not saying that I detest it or anything. That's reserved for the Skull Island cartoon. This is just apathy. I feel nothing for this series at all. And I think a large part of that is because, well, first of all, it's still well made enough that I can't say that it was a completely incompetent hack job. But it didn't do anything truly spectacular either, of course, so it's just kind of there. But also there's the fact that it's really kind of ruled itself out of the MonsterVerse canon. Again, refer back to that video I made about explaining the different levels of canon when you've got a multimedia franchise going on. If there's a contradiction in one of the lower categories that doesn't line up with the main source, then you can't really say it's completely canon anymore. Those elements in particular that don't line up have to be stricken, and so much of Monarch doesn't line up that it's effectively it ruled itself out as apocrypha, which means there's really no reason to care about it. I can't even get that worked up about the contradictions because I know those contradictions only mean that none of it matters. The movies are just going to move ahead. I doubt they're going to directly reference any of this stuff. And whether or not there even is a season 2, Monarch's just going to be sort of its own thing, I believe. Which, you know, there's not necessarily any problem in being its own thing, except for the fact that it's not just its own thing. It's supposed to be fitting in with everything else. And the fact that there was so little effort put into making sure that it did line up, I mean, I don't really think there is any excusing that. The only reason I can think of as to why I would be looking forward to a potential second season is because I just want to see how Keiko responds to what the second and third generations of Randa have done with their personal lives. Can you even imagine what that's going to be like? All right, Hiroshi, let me get this straight. You're Ken's father and you're Kate's father, but they have different mothers. Yes, Mom, that's right. And you're married to both of their mothers. Well, I was married, but now I'm divorced from both of them. You divorced them just like that? Yeah, it's actually pretty easy to do. Wait a minute. Kate, are you really okay with this? Well, I'm not sure I'm okay with it, but I do understand it because I was two-timing my girlfriend back before... Wait a minute. Girlfriend? Yeah, I'm a lesbian. And you're just talking about that out loud? Well, talk about it. Heck, I march in parades about... Grandma, where are you going? I'm going back to the Hollow Earth. Don't any of you try to stop me. I mean, come on. She was a woman in the 1950s, raised in Japanese culture. Those are going to be her sensibilities. She's not going to be okay with anything she finds out that her son and her grandchildren have been doing. That will be actually hilarious. But, you know, otherwise, I don't know. It seems like the second season might be trying to explain a little thing that happened in the credits of King of the Monsters, where we had that one newspaper article that people noticed there was a reference to a giant robot being made on Skull Island. The last scene shows that Apex has set up a base on Skull Island. I'm guessing they're going to try explaining that they tried a proto-Mechagodzilla of some sort that was dealt with by Kong. Who knows? Maybe it'll be a Mechanicong. But of course, all of that depends on whether or not they get a second season ordered. To date, that hasn't actually happened. Monarch has apparently been doing very well for Apple TV, so it's likely that it'll happen. But I don't know if I actually care or not. I mean, I already know I'm not going to come back to any more of that Skull Island series because that was actively bad. Monarch was just sort of Like, I enjoyed certain episodes, didn't like certain others. Some of them, there were really good things to talk about. But overall, now that we've gotten to the finale, I am just ambivalent about going forward. There is one thing I can think of that might save the show going forward, and might in fact actually have saved this first season. I think Monarch Legacy of Monsters really should be a Monster of the Week series, where each episode there's a new Titan threat of some sort, or at least a new Titan. Maybe it's not always dangerous, maybe it's not always out to destroy everything, but it's something that needs to be dealt with. The characters encounter it, they're trying to figure it out, and then maybe either Godzilla or Kong shows up to fight it, or Monarch or Apex or whoever the heck deals with it on their own, contains it, kills it, whatever. And you have that self-contained episode, and you can still have the ongoing elements throughout. It is possible to have an episodic series that has a myth arc, if you will, that has those ongoing elements. Ultraman Blazar's doing it. I know I haven't talked about it in a while, but Ultraman Blazar has been doing that Monster of the Week format that's carried the Ultra series for 6 or 7 decades now. Almost as long as there's been Godzilla. Not quite, like minus 10 years, so I guess it would only be about 6 decades. Point is, it's got that same formula of every episode there's a new monster that Ultraman and Earth Garon have to deal with. Maybe that monster will stick around for 2 episodes, which is how you know it's really a threat, but never longer than 3 than that. And they can do that while still having this ongoing plot about how some of these creatures, these space creatures particularly, are all coming from the same place. And they might have a reason for it because the government is hiding something, but what are they hiding? Does Ultraman have anything to do with it? What does Earth Garen's new AI know about it? There's all sorts of stuff like that going on, but you still have that episodic format. I think Monarch would benefit from that. I don't think they're going to do it in the second season, of course. I think they're going to, if they get a second season, continue as they have been, which means, for the most part, if a monster shows up, it's going to be there and moving on. And occasionally you'll get ones that attack. But, yeah, that would be what I would do. I would rather see Monarch, when it continues, if it continues, go that route. But I don't think it's going to. So am I even going to stick around? I don't know. You know, there is one other thing that dawns on me. There was a trailer, well, sort of trailer, that dropped sometime in December to further promote Legacy of Monsters. It was clearly something where all the different actors were reading off of the same script, and it was edited to make it look like they were all just magically on the same page about telling you why you should watch this series. And there were different people who at the time saw it and were like, ooh, is this hinting at a particular monster that's going to show up and things like that? But what stood out to me were 2 things. First was the claim that you didn't have to have watched the other movies in order to watch Monarch. That it was apparently completely standalone, which is a bald-faced lie because you at least have to have seen Godzilla 2014 in order to understand Monarch, because that's literally where the events begin. I mean, I suppose they do explain enough of how there was a Godzilla attack at some point, but like, you really need to know the full details in order for Monarch to truly make sense. And even then, it's still not going to line up, as mentioned. The other thing that stood out to me was that the actors all said that Monarch is not a monster story, it's a human story. Which feels like a line written by someone who doesn't understand why people watch stuff with monsters in it. Almost like having monsters in it is, how do I put it? You know how there are 2 kinds of people who write genre fiction. I hate that term, but let's just use it for now. There are 2 kinds of people who write genre fiction. There are the ones who go out of their way to try saying, well, I have this really high concept that involves spaceships and time travel and aliens and underground civilizations, but you know, at its heart, it's really a story about the human condition and how we all interact with each other and should get along, and the futility of war and all these other serious talking points that I swear make it meaningful. Please don't walk away from me. And then there are the other kinds who are like, yeah, in my story I have werewolves in Nazi uniforms fighting against alien superheroes from the year 3500 AD. And it's just cool to see that sort of thing, don't you think? You know, there's the separation is that one of them is trying to justify the existence of his story in that genre, almost as if he's ashamed of the fact that it's in that genre. And the other is just reveling in the fact that his genre allows him to do some of the wackiest stuff imaginable. For my own part, I consider myself to be in the latter camp. And I just don't understand why anyone would want to be in the former camp. I mean, if you want to tell a story with monsters or aliens or weird things in it, just tell it. There's no shame in that. Yet here we have this trailer for Monarch Legacy of Monsters that's trying to convince us that it's not about the monsters, that the monsters shouldn't be our focus. And also, you don't have to watch the movies in order to understand it. If that's not a declaration of independence, if that's not the writer's way of telling us that they don't want anything to do with the movies, then I don't know what is. Yeah, so I guess my final assessment for this season of Monarch, which again might also be the whole series, but we'll see where that goes. And heck, I've been saying we'll see a lot during this whole journey. I mean, individually, episodes have had their highs and lows. Overall, that's the best I can bring myself to say about it. Well, now Godzilla Kong the New Empire has to deliver. That at least looks like it's going to be a fun popcorn film. And hopefully it is, but we won't know until April, will we? Anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, I guess. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Thank you all for watching. Now be sure to head down to the description to check us out on other platforms, as well as find links to the 5 current books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Again, thank you all, and we'll see you next time.